Well, g'day. The project I'm going to show you how to make today is this simple pen. It uses the inserts from the very basic original Bic biro style pen. That one's already had its insert taken out. Now this is a bit of a blast from the past for me, because these pens were something that I made over 20 years ago, in the days when you actually couldn't get any pen kits. There was no pen kits around, so this is the best I could do. I like the project because not only is it a simple project, but it means that you can make any style of pen, any shape, any length that you like. It's a good project for practicing your skew, and it's one of those projects that you can get a lot of use out of. So let's get on with making the very simple pen, and the first thing you need to consider is the right timber selection. Now, timber selection is quite important with this project because we need to drill a hole right down the middle of our piece of wood, and it's a long hole and it's quite a narrow hole. So to make sure that that hole does actually go down the middle and not wander off course, we've got to make sure that the timber that we've got is a nice close grain timber without any obvious difference between autumn or summer growth and winter growth. Now here is a good example of a piece of timber. Now this is claret ash, and we've got an obvious difference between their hard and soft timbers, and there is a chance that the drill bit actually follows the line of least resistance, and that is following the softer grain. So get a timber that is close grain and hasn't got those obvious differences. I'm going to be using a spur drive initially to drive the piece of timber because that's usually what most wood turners have got. I don't tend to use that because I use and much prefer the stem center. But anyway, a lot of people haven't got stem centers, so I'm going to use this spur drive. To drive the wood, we've got to make sure that we've got a saw cut across in the end of our timber so that the spur doesn't split the timber open. Now these parts of the spur drive plus the point itself can actually split your timber. So 2 saw cuts in there will certainly prevent that spur drive from splitting our timber. Doing this on a bandsaw is a very easy job. Some of you might not have one, so it's an easy job to hold this piece of timber in a vise and do those cuts with a tenon saw. What other equipment do we need? You're going to need a couple of drill bits. Now they're the same diameter, but they're different lengths. They're both 5/32 or 5/32, 5/32s, 4 millimeters. One's a short one, one's a long one, but the long one is the length of the insert or the inner of our pen. I found that these drill bits are quite easy to get at the hardware store. I'm going to put the shorter of the 2 drill bits in a Jacob's chuck in my tailstock and do some of the drilling with this Jacob's chuck and drill bit. The longer drill bit I'm going to hold with these vice grips and do the drilling by hand. Some vernier calipers or some standard calipers are going to be needed. I'm only using 2 tools, and that will be a 1/2 inch skew chisel and then a 1/8 or 3 mil parting tool. I am going to be drilling a hole down the middle of my piece of wood, and I am going to do it on the lathe, so I need to have a way by which I can hold this piece of wood by one end, by the headstock end, so that I can drill the other end, and I'll show you how I do that. Now let's get started by putting the timber into the spur drive using that saw cut, other end lined up with the middle into the live center of my tailstock, and we're ready to go. Tool rest, I'm going to be starting with a skew chisel, and my tool rest is going to be about center height. Spin by hand, and we're ready to go. Now I'm going to go flat chat, so that's 3000 RPM, and my initial cut is going to be a backwards cut, or 2. And they just take the edges off the corners of that blank, so that when I do this cut, there's no risk of a big splinter flying off. Now there might be a couple of videos that you might want to watch before you go too much further with this project, and one of them is on the use of the skew. The skew made is easy, of which I did 2 videos. Another one was how to drill down end grain, deep holes down end grain. There's a video on that. And the third one is using or sizing timber on the lathe. Now I've got my timber almost to the round. That'll do. And what I'm going to do actually is turn a Morse taper, a small section of a Morse taper down this end. Now that's actually quite simple. I'm going to measure 25 millimeters from the end with my verniers, make a mark at 25 mil. Just here I'm going to turn it down to 17 millimeters with my parting tool. Just lower my tool rest a bit for that, take it away. So parting tool, 17 millimeters. A little bit of vibration, don't worry about that. Now before you do what I'm doing now, make sure you have a look at that other video on sizing timber on your lathe. There's 17 millimeters. At this 25 millimeter mark, I'm going to turn it to 18 millimeters. There's 18 millimeters. If you want that in imperial, then grab a Morse taper, an existing one, and measure it. Measure it at 2 points. Now I'm going to turn this section of the timber from 18 millimeters down to 17 millimeters. With my skew chisel initially, using the skew like this, and then I'm just going to scrape. Just go in gently, and what I can even do is extend that taper up a bit further, like so. I could even go a little bit further, extending it. That's all I need to do. Lathe off, take my tailstock away, I'll knock my spur drive out, and then this will fit in here hopefully beautifully. Now that's not a bad fit, but you can see just here where it's rubbing, so if you wanted to you could put it back between centres and just take that little bit off. I think that'll be alright once I get my tailstock up. Now that tailstock, that live centre, is going into the centre of the cross that I made with the tenon saw. I'm going to lock that off, turn the lathe on and wind the tailstock in, or the quill in, take that away, and there it is. So now we've got our wood held in the lathe securely using that Morse taper. I'm now going to take out my live centre, and I've got my Jacob's chuck and drill bit in the lathe. Tailstock out of the way for a moment, lathe slowed down, it's only going to go about 500 RPM, and because I've made that dent in here with my live centre, it gives the drill bit a starting point, so it's going to find that dent and drill down the centre. There we go. Now don't try and drill that all in one action, all in one go. There's a chance that you'll get your drill bit stuck in there. Clear that swarth out. I've got a little bit of a pick here. I'm just pushing the tailstock in here for that last little bit and out. As I said, I'm going to hold the longer drill bit in these vice grips simply because the drill bit isn't long enough to fit in the Jacob's chuck and drill the hole to the depth. But once I've got that hole started, I found this quite a good way to drill. You're not having to wind your quill in and out. Drill in a little bit, take it out, clean the swarth out of there, make sure you got your tailstock well and truly out of the way, and you haven't got the live centre in there, so that when you're pulling out you don't put your hand into the spike of the live centre or even your elbow. And I've done that before. Unfortunately I've done it more than once too. So just in and out. Now there is a problem with doing all of this drilling, going in and out, and the problem is that you have got a tendency to make the entrance of the hole a little bit bigger than what you want. But we've got a little bit of excess, so we can take off this first 1/8 of an inch of the length of this piece of wood later on. When you're cleaning the swarth out of your drill, remember that the flutes or the edges of the flutes are quite sharp and they can cut your hand quite easily. So it's not a bad idea to get something sharp like a nail or a screw or something like this to pick it out with. And there we have it. Now I'm going to tighten up my tailstock a little bit, but don't push it in too much or else you might actually split the wood open just down here. Tighten your quill up, and look at that, I can get the tool rest nice and close to the wood because I've got no chuck down here. Speed the lathe up, flat chat, and I'm ready to shape my pen. At this point I might actually get rid of those saw cuts that were down here. Take a little bit of length off there. Undo the quill and tighten that up a little bit. Not too much. You don't want to use this as a wedge to split open that wood. I'm going to turn the lathe off, make sure I have got rid of those saw cuts, and I can see that I just haven't, so I just need to go a little bit deeper there. So another cut. This cut that I'm doing here, I've described well in the Skew Made Easy Part 2. Just as a bit of revision, there is the rotation of my wood. There's the skew chisel at 45 degrees to that rotation. Bevel rubbing first, there's the bevel rubbing, lift the back of the handle up until it starts to cut and off you go. I've got the tool rest up just a little bit too high, just because I feel it's uncomfortable height. I'm sort of working up like that, just dropped it a little bit and now I'm working at a far more comfortable height. Notice how I've got the tool into my waist here. I'm holding it like so, nice and rigid, so that the only thing that's moving the skew chisel is my body movement, not my arm movement or wrist movement. Now this is a particularly hard timber below. With a softer timber, you probably won't get all this rattling around, this chattering. One thing I'll do now, I'll just pause and we'll measure how deep the hole will be. So there's my drill bit, and the hole will have finished up here somewhere. Now I did take a little bit of wood off, I know, so actually the hole's probably more like that, but just add a little bit. So I know that that is where the hole is. If you feel as though your drill bit did wander off course, well, make sure that you just keep this section here, especially around this bit here, the widest, so that if the hole has wandered off course, you're not actually going to go through the side of the hole. Lathe back on. keep this a bit of a bulge so that it's comfortable to grip. I'll take it down a little bit more than that. Now this diameter here, you're trying to get down to the diameter of the insert. Now it's not critical that it's the same. In fact, I tend to make these a little bit bigger, and you can even just round that over a little bit like that. If you want to check, you can, so turn the lathe off, get all of that out of the way, and see how we're looking with that. Now I can see that that actually isn't fitting up the end of the hole, so the hole is too short, but that's alright because I've got a little bit of extra there that I can cut off. But I can also tell that that diameter down here is looking good for that. So there's a little bit of a bevel there. Bring that up gently, tighten my tailstock up, gently push the quill in, and ready to go again. Now I'm going to try and get this a little bit thinner here. I'm going to make that my end there. Your pens can be any length that you like. They can be longer. The only problem with going longer is you're going to get even more vibration. Now one way to actually stop that vibration, and I'll just try and get this tool rest in a little bit more, is by doing this. The only problem with doing this is your hands can get a bit hot, your fingers can get hot, or you can do it this way. Now the only problem is that the stem of my tool rest is in the way, so I'm just going to move that along. I'm going to work like this. So I've got the thumb on my skew chisel, supporting it on the tool rest, guiding it, helping to guide it, helping it to get it in the right spot. And these fingers are applying pressure in the opposite direction to that which the skew chisel is applying on the wood. Just a little bit thinner there, and I'm liking that. And I might just put a little bit of a decoration there, and I'm going to leave it at that. No, I'm not. I'm going to do that. Now I'm going to do these V cuts. Once again, look at that Skew Made Easy video and this cut here. So I'm going to start to finish this end off. I'm going to leave about 1/4 of an inch, perhaps even a little bit less, of timber down here, which I'm going to have to finish off by hand. So I'm going to take as much of that off as I can, and there is my pen ready for sanding. Get my tool rest out of the way. Now I've slowed the lathe down to about 500 RPM to sand. I always think sanding at a slow speed is much better than a high speed for a couple of reasons. Number one, your fingers don't get heated up. And number two, it saves your sandpaper. I'm absolutely convinced that your sandpaper lasts longer sanding at a slower rate. When I'm sanding, I'm not applying a lot of pressure onto the wood, especially down this end, because if I'm pushing hard down on the wood, I have got a chance of breaking this section of the pen out, splitting it, so be careful of that. And more pressure doesn't sand quicker. So you apply light pressure when you're sanding. You don't have to press really hard. it doesn't achieve anything except for wearing your sandpaper out quicker and getting your fingers really, really hot. There it is. Once again, sand with the grain. Now I'm going to use this U-Butte Triple E Ultra Shine initially to finish the pen. The Triple E is a cutting compound, so it's not only polishes but it does effectively sand this even finer. So initially I just wipe it on, a liberal amount it gets wiped on while the lathe is not running, so that you don't spread it all over your workshop. We can get that out of the way. Now, so that I don't wrap the rag around the pen and run the risk of actually breaking it, I'm going to get a wad of this rag and I'm just going to use that same section of rag to polish this. And as I polish, turn the lathe on, going quickly. So I'm going about 2000 RPM, and I'm just going to use that one section of rag to polish. I can apply some pressure or opposing pressure so that I'm not putting any strain on this section of the pen. But using that one section of the rag, just going backwards and forwards, and what you're effectively doing is breaking that cutting compound down to a finer and finer compound, and therefore, in a sense, sanding this timber finer and finer. Now I'm not going to show you every second of this polishing because it will take a while, but I'll let you know how long it takes. Now I've been polishing for about 2 or 3 minutes now, and I've got a fresh section of a rag to just clean things up. So I'm cleaning up those grooves with my thumbnail. Wonderful things are thumbnails. Getting that excess wax off and giving that a bit of a buff. Holding the extra rag in my other hand so that it doesn't wrap around the pen. Let's have a look at that with the lathe off. That's a beautiful piece of timber. Now I'm going to finish this pen off with U-Butte's shallow wax. I've got a clean rag here. I don't need a lot of this stuff. Wipe that on once again without the lathe going, so it doesn't splatter all over the place. And this is a friction polish, so we do need the lathe on. Make sure excess rag is held in your hand or you're using a wad, and I'm going to pinch this like so, using the heat to harden the shallow wax. One of the mistakes people make with using shallow wax is applying too much of it. They think more is better, and it's not the case. Once I've used a bit of heat with the same section of rag that I used to apply the wax in the first place, I'm going to get a fresh section of rag, give that a polish, get into the grooves with my thumbnails and the very end and the end grain. There it is. All I need to do is now part off this end. Tool rest just below centre so that I can use the parting tool at a comfortable level. Now you can see the parting tool is around about horizontal at the moment. When I go down to the centre, I'm having to lift it up too high, which means my tool rest is just too high. So tool rests, people say what height are the tool rests? Well, make sure your tool rest is at a height that makes the tool use comfortable. Lathe is going still at 2000 RPM, and I'm just using the very corner, the very right hand corner of my parting tool to get down and just nibbling away at this end, and just taking it gently so that I've only got a little bit left to sand off. Sand with the grain, which is going to be like so. That's about all I need to do. Bit of shallow wax on a rag, just a bit. And I might use a buffing mop to tidy that up. All that is left now is for me to get the insert. It's just 1/8 of an inch too long. Grab some scissors, cut off a little bit, good 1/4 of an inch there. And there's my pen. Now this is too loose. I was hoping that was going to happen. This was a little tip, a little trick somebody suggested to me. Thanks Lockie Story. Some Teflon tape. I'm going to wrap that around the ink part initially, then down onto the nib section. I don't want a lot of layers, and I'm certainly not going to go to the very end. There's some Teflon tape around there. Beautiful. Not too tight, and I can easily take it out by my hands. Put a breathing hole in here, so I'm going to drill a small, so I've got the smallest twist drill bit I can find, and I'm going to put a hole in the, just got it started there, drilling through to the middle, and I found the hole. And there is my pen. So there it is, the very simple biro pen. Beautiful piece of timber, comfortable, exactly the shape that I want, the length that I want. Nice little project. That's all for now. Safe turning, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'll see you another time.